Say hi, Phil. Hi, Phil. Anyway, me and Phil today are going to talk to you about conclusions, which are a very, very important part of wrapping up any science experiment, especially one that you designed yourself. Now, you may know and can remember back and think and picture the poster that I have in my room. The poster that I have up in my room that looks like this explains that there are 3 parts to a conclusion, and this is review for a lot of you. And so I'm going to go through the 3 parts and then show you how this can all look together in a larger conclusion, because I will tell you that whenever you are writing a conclusion to wrap up an experiment, there is a lot of points wrapped up in it, and this is really where you explain what you learned in this project. And you want to make sure that you do a good job with it, because you don't want to have spent all of this time and not accurately be able to explain yourself. So in this video, we're going to learn about the 3 parts of the conclusion, and you are going to apply those and look at how you can write a conclusion well and how you could make improvements to a conclusion that's already been written. So let's dive in and check it out. So let's start with our building block. Our building block is our claim. Okay, this is my block. You are going to build everything else on top of this claim in your conclusion. Your claim is one simple sentence. One sentence, that's it. And even though it is simple, it packs a lot of weight because everything else that you are going to write will build on that one idea. And so we want to make sure that we include and that your claim is a fact that you have learned in your experiment. And when we take that fact, we want to make sure that we relate it back to our 2 variables, our independent and our dependent variable. We want to make sure that we have explained how what we have changed impacted what we measured. And that's it. In one sentence, you're going to explain how you changed something in your experiment and how it created a different result that you measured. It is a fact. It is not opinion. There is no I. There is no I saw. It is a statement of fact. Let's take a look and see how this can look in an actual conclusion. Okay, so in order to get started with all of this, what we need to do is we need to actually have an experiment that we're working with. So let's take a look at this basic experiment. Does the length of the string affect a pendulum swing? If we have the independent variable as the length of the string and the dependent variable is the amount of swings per 10 seconds, or what we're measuring, and then we have collected data that's listed right here that the 24 centimeter string swung 28 times and the 50 centimeter string swung 20 times. And we've done background research even before we got started that said exactly and related it back to a famous scientist's work, Galileo, that found that differences in length of the string is the only changing factor in pendulums, because a longer base will result in less swings, which actually totally relates back to what we found here. Now, knowing all of this and looking back to your own notebook pages and the research that you have done and the data you've collected, how can we go about writing a claim? Keeping in mind that we need to have both our independent variable and our dependent variable worked into our claim, how could we go about writing a strong claim? Well, we would need to say and relate it and think about what we've learned from our experiment by looking at our data. And our data said that the longer string has less swings. Well, our independent variable was the length of the string, and our dependent variable was the amount of swings. So does that sentence state a fact and also have in it those 2 things? You bet. So our claim could be that the longer the string, the slower the pendulum swings. Hopefully you can all see that right up in here.
Now, I want you to take a look at another claim and tell me and think in your brain, and we'll talk about it in class, is this a good claim? So take a look at this claim here. I observed the shorter pendulum swing more than the longer pendulum. I'd recommend that in the summary of this video that you address whether or not this is a good claim, why or why not, to be able to go deeper into what we really understand about claims. So think about it, reflect, and write.
All right, we've got claim down. That's our building block. Going off of claim, we are going to add on our evidence section. That's part 2, evidence. Our evidence section is all about data. Now, do you remember how I said that there are no opinions in your claim? No I's, no I saws, nothing like that? That's going to carry over into our evidence section as well. Evidence is just data, no opinions. This is where we are going to take and present information from our data tables about how this backs up that statement that we wrote in our claim. Now, it is really important that we are specific with the data that we present, and I'm going to show an example of that here in a second. But we also want to make sure that we don't give every piece of data that we collected, especially if we collected a whole bunch. Now, if you did a simpler experiment, you might have to present everything. But if you collected multiple things, you want to make sure that you keep it relevant to what relates back to our building block. Let's take a look together as an example as to how we can build in our evidence section what looks like too much data, just the right amount of data, and the most important thing to remember when you are putting in your evidence section. So let's take a look at the example.
When we are thinking about our evidence section, we want to consider those things that were addressed in the video. We want to make sure that it supports the claim, that it's clear, and again, that it is a no opinion zone. So going back to our experiment about does the length of a string affect a pendulum swing, and we have our 2 variables and we have our data in here. This in our evidence section is where we want to focus on the data. How can we break this down and explain this without giving too much information? The biggest thing that we really want to realize here is that we do want to make sure that this is a writing portion. So we want to make sure that we have clear sentences. And even if it is data, we want to make sure that we include labels at the end of it to make sure that it is very clear. In this experiment, we were keeping track of the number of swings per 10 seconds. So we want to make sure that we have labeled what is a swing and what is actually the time. Now, I haven't given you overwhelming amounts of data here in our sample experiment, so we can actually take this and work with it pretty well. We want to make sure that we give enough data, not too much, but we want to make sure that we do present more than one piece of data. Okay, we want to make sure that we go more than one piece of data when we are explaining our evidence section. So, let's go ahead and take a look at example, and we will discuss again in class, and I encourage you to do this in your summary section, whether or not this is a good evidence section. So here is our sample. The shorter string pendulum swung 28 times in 10 seconds, and the 50 centimeter string swung 20 times in 10 seconds. Take a second, reflect, think, is this a strong evidence section?
Our last part of the video is going to talk about part 3 of conclusions, which is your explanation section. Remember how our claim and our evidence are no opinion zones? This is where you get to put in your opinion. But it is really critical that you remember and that you think that this explanation part, this is for science class. And the biggest problem that students have when writing their explanation section is that they forget the science. So, to get the highest level of points and to continue to build off in our explanation section, we need to work in the science. We need to work in vocabulary words. we need to reference an actual scientist who has done work about this to help you understand it. This is where we're going to draw from our background research that we've done about this project. This is where we're going to pull from theories and science laws and science facts to help make connections to explain what we saw in our claim and our evidence section. It is a really difficult part to write. It is the hardest thing that students struggle with, but you can do it. Go back to the notes that you've taken to help prepare you for this project and look for the science. Look for the vocabulary words and include those words in your writing. Let's take a look at an example that will explain it a little bit more in depth.
And lastly, as we're working into the toughest section to write, the explanation section, that we want to make sure that we tie in the science behind your experiment and that it uses science as a link to the claim and the evidence. The biggest way that you can do that and show me that you understand the science behind it is to actually link into science vocabulary that you've studied, into perhaps science principles, perhaps linking also to specific scientists' work that have studied these topics that you have learned about. Now, our explanation section is going to tie in both our claim and our data that we have collected, but it also needs to go back to that initial first week that we did all of that research, and I encourage you to find so many sites to use for your bibliography. That is a big part of it, because in this section, okay, we can link back to a specific scientist's work who have found and has been proven true over and over again. Galileo, he did his research a long, long time ago, but people still are holding it to be true. And so we want to make sure that we reference Galileo in our explanation. So let's take a look at this explanation section. And I want you to review and think if this is a good explanation section and what qualities or characteristics are important in an explanation section. Please review this and think about qualities and characteristics of a good explanation section. Lastly, really be careful as we are putting together our trifold. Our trifold is our showcase. It is our showpiece that if we are not there, people could look at all of the things that are on my trifold, like these requirements here on the left, and be able to get a good idea of what I did in my experiment. I want you to consider and look at the things that are on the right, and also look at the science page, because I have posted the rubric that I'm going to be using to evaluate you on that page, that you can start to evaluate it and see how your project and your work matches up.
That's going to wrap it up for conclusions. Remember the 3 parts: claim, evidence, and explanation, and apply them using the examples I gave in the video. So good luck. Remember also that this is formal writing, that everything needs to be in sentences, and that you would be a great idea, again, to have someone read through your conclusion to make sure that it makes sense. Good luck with writing your conclusions, and don't forget to ask for help if you need it.